Hello, you're welcome to this lesson. In this lesson, we'll be looking at drafting the basic bodice block. Looking at the measurement guide, we'll see that we have two sections. The first section for the body measurements, where we have our bust, waist, hip, the shoulder measurement, the nape to waist, across back and across chest measurements, while the second section has the proportions. The proportion you'll be using will depend on the size of the bust you are working with. So if you have bust 100, then you'll be working with this proportion. If you have bust 88, you'll be working with this proportion. So if it happens that the bust measurement is not on the guide as you are seeing it, for example, if your bust measurement of 98 centimeters, you can choose to use proportion for 96 centimeters, or you use the proportion for 100 centimeters. Drafting our pattern, we need to make sure that our pattern paper is big enough to accommodate this box. So this box, the length of this box is from this point to this point is 75 centimeters, while from this point to this point here, it is going to be the area of half bust plus 5 or half hip plus 3 centimeters. For example, if the bust is 88 and then we have hip as 94, so half bust plus 5 gives us 44 plus 5, which is 49, while half hip plus 3 gives us 47 plus 3, that is 50 centimeters. So for me, I'll be using 50 centimeters, that's half hip plus 3 centimeters. So this line here is the top line, which is about 5 centimeters away from the top edge of the paper, while this line here, which is going to be our center back line, that's the line closer to you, is going to be about 3 to 5 centimeters away from the edge of the paper. So we're going to label this line here as our center back line, and then we'll label the line across away from us our center front line. So remember, when doing pattern drafting, you have to label all your construction line. So this is our center front. So once we have drawn our box, once we have our box drawn, so we can now start drafting our pattern. Remember, at center back, mark 0.03 centimeters below the top line. And rule a short perpendicular line towards center front. Label this 0.0. From 0.0, measure the nape to waist measurement and mark as waistline. So this line will be taken across to center front. So to get the accurate measurement, you will take our full measurement from the top line to our waistline. You take the full measurement from top line to the waistline and take it across to center front. So you label as waistline. From the waistline, go down 22 centimeters, which is the average waist to hip measurement on center back. You rule this line across to center front and label as hip line. To get the bust line, we are going to take our nape to waist measurement, divide that by 2 and add 1.5 and measure it from 0.0. You measure this here. So this same point, we are going to take it across to center front, and we need to get the full measurement from top line. So whatever measurement you have at top, from top line to the bust point, to the bust line, you take that to center front and label this as bust line. The across back line is halfway between line O and the bust line. So you take the measurement and divide that by 2. You rule a short perpendicular line that does not get to center front. From line O, measure 3 centimeters below for our shoulder line. And also rule a short perpendicular line. So here we have our shoulder line, our across back line, the bust line, waistline, and the hip line. On our line O, which is the neckline, we are going to measure 7 centimeters for the back neck width, and then take that 2 centimeters up. So you rule a short perpendicular line 2 centimeters above the neck width measurement. So this is our NP. On the shoulder line, across back line, and the bust line, measure half of the across back measurement. So connect these 3 points with a short perpendicular line. On the shoulder line, move out by 2 centimeters and label this as SP. That's the shoulder point. The measurement from NP to SP should be your shoulder measurement plus 1.5 to 2 centimeters. So we need to take the measurement and check if we have that measurement. So here I have more than my shoulder measurement plus 2 centimeters. So I'll need to adjust my shoulder point and then adjust this as the new shoulder point here. So I'll rule a short line between the NP and SP. So I'll take my curve rule and draw a curve from NP to point O, making sure that the curve does not get to point O. So the curve should stop at least 1.5 to 2 centimeters away from point O. On the bust line, I'm going to move out by 5 centimeters towards the center front and label this as back UP. On the hip line, I'll divide my hip measurement by 4 and mark that for my hip point, and then connect the back UP to my hip point. This serves as the straight underarm seam. To draw the armhole curve, I'm going to come to the angle between the across back measurement and the back UP. Draw a 1 centimeter box as to serve as a guideline. So this is 3 centimeters. And then on my across back line, I'll measure 3 centimeters below. So I'll connect my SP to the across back line and then connect my back UP to a point which is 3 centimeters below the across back line, passing through the guideline. So label this the back pattern. For the front pattern, I turn my paper around so that the center front will be close to me. So our top line serves as point O for the front pattern. All the measurements we are going to take will be from the top line. So we label our top line as point O. For the neckline, we measure 4.5 centimeters below point O. And then I'll rule a short perpendicular line towards center back. From point O, I'll measure the neck depth, which is 7.5 centimeters, and then the neck width, which is the same as the back. Then I'll connect for my neckline. So this is the shoulder line. Measure 4 centimeters above the bust line and draw a line towards center back. Label it the chest line. Measure 16.5 centimeters on the shoulder line. Draw a short line passing through that point from NP. Mark half of the nipple to nipple measurement on both the bust line and the waistline. From a point 2 centimeters below the nipple point on the bust line, draw a short guideline towards the top line. Where the guideline touches the new shoulder line, measure 2 centimeters away and draw the first dart leg from that point to the point 2 centimeters below the bust line. From this point here, I'm going to mark my dart measurement. So for bust 88, the dart measurement is 7 centimeters. So I'll measure that 7 centimeters away from this line. And then connect this point to 2 centimeters below the bust line. To mark the shoulder point, I'll take the measure from NP to the first dart leg. Take note of that measurement, skip the dart, and then continue my measurement from the second dart leg and mark the shoulder measurement. So remember, for the front pattern, we're going to use the actual shoulder measurement. While the back pattern, the SP is the shoulder measurement plus 1.5 to 2 centimeters. So for the front pattern, we'll be using the actual measurement while keeping this dart space. So this dart is not part of our pattern. On the across chest line, which is this is the chest line, we have the bust line here. To get the chest point on the chest line, we'll take our across chest measurement, divide that by 2 and mark that on our chest line, and we need to skip this dart space as well. So one way to do that is to measure the dart space here, that's the gap created by the dart, and add that to half of the across chest measurement. So you take that measurement, the same measurement, and mark it on the bust line as well. So this is our chest point, and then you connect the points. So we're going to connect our chest point to the SP, the shoulder point. To get the front UP, we need to find the bust width of the back pattern, which is the measurement from center back to back UP on the bust line, and subtract that from the total bust width of the pattern. So the total bust width of the pattern is half bust plus 5 centimeters. On the hip line, the front and back pattern will share the same hip point. Remember, this box was created using half hip plus 3 centimeters. So my front and back pattern will share the same hip point, while on the bust line there will be a gap. So your pattern might share the same UP, that's the underarm point, for both the front and the back pattern, and have a gap at the hip point, or you share the same hip point and then have a gap at the underarm point. So I'll connect the front UP to the hip point. Get the armhole curve for the front pattern. I'll measure the distance between the shoulder point and the chest point and find the midpoint, that's the halfway point. So at this halfway point, I'm going to go in by 1 centimeter. And the angle between this chest point and the front UP, we'll draw our 1 centimeter guideline and then mark a point which is 1.5 centimeters away from this angle as a guide. So connect the shoulder point to the chest point, passing through the 1 centimeter guide here, and then connect the chest point to the front UP. So we have our front armhole. Right now we have our straight underarm seam, which runs from the underarm point, that's the front and the back underarm point, to the hip point. This serves as our straight underarm seam. So to get our shaped underarm seam, on the back pattern, I'll come in, that's from this line, by 2 centimeters. And while for the front pattern, I'll come in by 1 centimeter. On the back pattern, I'll connect the waist point to the back UP using a straight line. On the front pattern, I need to mark my true bust line. You can mark 4 centimeters below the bust line, or you take the measurement from the shoulder point to the nipple as your true bust line. And then you rule a short line to the underarm seam. So we have our true bust line. To rule the shaped underarm seam on the front pattern, we'll connect the back UP to this point using a curve, and then from here, from this point here, I'll connect it to the waist point on the front pattern. So this is my shaped underarm seam for the front pattern and the back pattern. So you label this as WP. On the waistline, we'll go down by 1 to 2.5 centimeters on center front. depending on the size. Then at the waist point, we go down by 1 centimeter for the front pattern and then 1 centimeter at the back pattern. So I'll connect this together. So I'll connect the lower waistline on the back pattern from this point to the original waistline at center back. While for the front pattern, I'll connect the 1 centimeter lower point to the 2.5 centimeter on center front. And then connect the waist point to the lower waistline like so. Then also connect this. So looking at our pattern, if we take the measurement from center back to the waist point and then from on the back pattern and then add that to the measurement from the waist point to center front, we'll find out that it's more than our desired waist measurement. The desired waist measurement is waist divided by 4 plus 3 centimeter is. So when we take our measurement from center back to the waist point on the back pattern and then waist point to the center front on the front pattern, we need to find the difference between that measurement and the desired waist measurement. So you take this measurement from center back to this waist point here, skip this gap and then continue from the waist point on the front pattern to the center front line. So I have 46.5 centimeters here, and my desired waist is waist measurement divided by 2 plus 3 centimeters. This gives me 37 centimeters. So the difference here is 9.5 centimeters. So I have 9.5 centimeters excess on my waistline. First thing we're going to do is from center back, I'll take out 2 centimeters to rule our slanted center back. And that's from the across back measurement to the waistline. So we have our slanted CB. That means I have 7.5 centimeters of excess left. Along the waist point on the back, I'll go in by 1 centimeter to have the inner shaped seam and also connect this. So this is the inner shaped seam, and while this is the outer shaped seam. So this is 1 centimeter, and then I'll do the same for the front pattern. I'll go in by 1 centimeter and also connect using my hip curve. So this is my the inner shaped seam for the front. So I have 6.5 centimeters excess left on my pattern, and that can be taken out using that. To get the dart position for the front pattern, we'll take our nipple to nipple measurement and divide that by 2, or you take the across chest measurement and divide that by 4. So whichever one you are using, you mark it from center front along the waistline and also from center front on the true bust line. So I'm using half of the nipple to nipple measurement, so I'll measure that from center front on the waistline, on the lower waistline, and then do the same for the true bust line. While for the back pattern, it's going to be quarter of our across back measurement. So we'll take quarter of our across back measurement and mark that on the lower waistline and the bust line. So we now have our dart position on the front pattern and then the back pattern. So to know the dart width that we're going to use, we are going to take the remaining excess, which is 6.5 centimeters, divide that by 2 by giving the front pattern more than the back pattern. So for the dart width on the back, I'll be using 2.5 centimeters, while for the front, I'll be using 4 centimeters. So what this means is that I need to measure 2 centimeters on both sides of my dart position, like so, on the front pattern, and then I'll divide the 2.5 by 2 and measure that and mark that on both sides of my dart position. So generally for that, the dart length above the waistline is between 12 to 13 centimeters. while below the waistline is 13 to 15 centimeters. So for the back pattern, I'll measure 13 centimeters above the waistline. That's above the waistline, and then 15 centimeters below the waistline, and then connect this. So this is the midpoint of my dart. So this is the dart for the back pattern, while for the front pattern I'll be measuring 15 centimeters below the waistline, that's lower waistline, while above the waistline. So remember, I'm using my lower waistline here as a guide on the front pattern. The dart should be at least 2 to 3 centimeters away from the bust point on the true bust line here. And connect that. We have the waist dart at the front and then the waist dart at the back pattern. So to rule our side seam to the hip point, so you take your hip curve like this and connect it. So we have the inner side seam and the outer shaped side seam. So you do the same for the back pattern. Then you make sure you blend all the curves. So now we need to fold our shoulder dart. So you turn your paper to the wrong side. So you pinch the dart apex. This is the dart apex. So you pinch this here. Increase the dart leg closer to center front. And then connect both legs like this. You close the dart like this. You rule on your true shoulder line. So to transfer this mark to the folded paper beneath, we need to use our tracing wheel. You open this up and then you connect this. So this is our new shoulder line. If we don't do this, by the time you are sewing your pattern together, this is what will happen. You realize that this part of the pattern is shorter than the neck point. So we need to adjust this to make them equal by ruling this new shoulder point. So for the back pattern, remember we have an excess of about 2 centimeters on our shoulder line. So to get the dart position, we'll find the measurement of the shoulder line from NP to SP. You take that measurement and ensure that it is our shoulder measurement plus 1.5 to 2 centimeters. If you have more, remember to adjust it. If you have less, you equally have to adjust it. So I have 14 centimeters here. I'll find the midpoint and then take out half of the excess on both sides of that midpoint. So my pattern has excess of 2 centimeters. So I'll take that. I'll measure 1.1 centimeter on both sides of the midpoint. I'll rule a 7 centimeter line perpendicular to this shoulder line here. Connect it to the midpoint. So just like we did for the front, and then I'll pinch the dart at the apex and then crease the line closer to center back. And then draw the new shoulder line. I also use my tracing wheel across the folded part of the paper. And redraw that with a straight line. Okay, the slanted center back will also be connected to the hip line using a straight line. So this is our slanted center back from the across back line to the waistline and then to the hip line. So now we need to indicate our grain lines. So for the back pattern, the grain line is between 4 to 5 centimeters away from the center back line. And this line is parallel to the original center back, to the initial center back line. That's the straight center back line and not the slanted center back line. So as a rule of thumb, I like to indicate my grain line on both sides of the dart on my patterns. The grain line is perpendicular to the straight waistline, not the slanted waistline. So I have one grain line here. You can do only one, but I usually do two, so that when I have to separate my pattern, like we'll see in the next lessons, then you know you have your grain line to guide you. So for the front pattern, I'll do the same. Your grain line should be, the straight grain line should be parallel to. So to draw the front neckline, we'll draw our 1 centimeter box and rule a guideline and mark a point 3 centimeters away from that angle, and then connect the NP to center front with a curve. So making sure that the curve stops about 1.5 to 2 centimeters away from center front. So we have our front neckline. So this is the front pattern and that's the back pattern.